that's my way of giving back is by being very transparent that this journey has been brutally hard. It has pushed me to the limits of what I thought I could persevere through.
Welcome to the Food Grads Podcast, the podcast that takes you on a fascinating journey into the hearts and minds of the amazing people who work in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. My name is Veronica, and I am a PhD candidate studying fat-based food emulsions. On this podcast, we share insights from professionals at all stages of their careers, find out what they do, why they do it, and how they are changing the food world one day at a time. So no matter what your passion is, there's always something for everyone in food, and we'll help you find it. Hello everyone, it's Veronica. Welcome back to the Food Grads Podcast. On today's episode, we are talking about entrepreneurship, sharing your story on social media, and perseverance. Our guest today is Mitch Jacobson. Mitch is the CEO of Rviita Energy Tea. Rviita Energy Tea is a clean pick-me-up drink made with caffeine from tea, organic honey, and vitamins packed in a low carbon footprint recyclable beverage pouch. Reviita is a company centered around inspiring others and helping people to become healthier and more productive. Reviita is a Calgary-based company that distributes energy teas in over 1,000 stores across Canada and is rapidly expanding in both Canada and the US. Mitch graduated from the University of Calgary with a degree in petroleum engineering. He got a job right out of school as a water strategist and a water sustainability engineer for an oil and gas company. But during that time, he witnessed a close friend having a heart attack, which was attributed to unhealthy energy drinks. Mitch believed that there had to be a better product which supplied energy and was also made from healthy ingredients. Mitch used his experience in sports combined with a lot of trial and error in the lab to create a low-sugar energy tea made to give you a little energy when you need it most, without the crash and unhealthy ingredients. Thank you so much, Mitch, for taking time to come on the show. How has your day been going?
My day's been going really well, Veronica. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. And I know that this week must be a pretty special week for you because as of recording this podcast, I know that yesterday was your 4-year anniversary of Reviita. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. It's been a crazy 4 years. It feels like yesterday, and it feels like a lifetime all on the all on the same go. So it's been an incredible journey, and I've learned so much these last 4 years. Very blessed.
Wow. Yeah. In the same amount of time, someone could have done an undergraduate degree or even a PhD. So the amount that you've come since you've started, it's really impressive. And I'd love to dive into some of that as we go into this episode. So I'm going to let you take it away because I know you can describe yourself better in Reviita. So please tell us more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Veronica. So my name is Mitch Jacobson. I am the founder, one of the founders and CEO of Rviita Energy Tea. It's a healthy energy drink that we started out of my garage, more or less, a little over 4 years ago. And we're now distributed in about 1,200 stores all across Canada. So it's a unique beverage in the sense that it's all natural ingredients. So all of our caffeine comes from tea. So all of our the number one thing we hear from customers is they feel great without the crash. And we packaged it in not a can, not a glass bottle, not a plastic bottle, but a flexible beverage pouch. We actually custom designed using freezer paper and a curling iron in my kitchen. We have a patent on our packaging. So we've done something that's very unique to the North American marketplace, something we're really proud of, and we're really passionate about, helping people with better for you energy, right? A healthy alternative to conventional sugar and chemical filled energy drinks.
Well, your product has been like the perfect thing for me. One of the things, I'm not a coffee drinker by any means, and I've been a hardcore tea drinker for many years because I just don't like the taste of coffee. And I've not wanted to have energy drinks. Not that I don't enjoy them, but it doesn't feel really good to be drinking an energy drink at like 2 p.m. I'd much rather go for tea. So it's been a perfect option.
You hit the nail on the head. That was, a lot of our inspiration came from when I was working my office job, right? I'd have 2 cups of coffee in the morning, but when it's 2 p.m. and it's warm out, the last thing you want is another
Yeah.
cup of coffee. But what else is there, right? If you're not going to drink a carbonated energy drink, you're kind of stuck just with coffee. So this was the original gap that we were trying to fill in the marketplace, was that healthy afternoon pick me up.
For sure. And I just love again, the tea aspect because it also seems like so many of them were either iced tea, which isn't really giving you that energy boost, is coming
Yes.
from the sugar. But then you just want the flavor that's not matcha? Like, sometimes you're just like, I'd like some alternatives that are tea, just not matcha, that are energy."
Exactly, yeah, nothing really exists in the marketplace other than our product, so that was the exact inspiration for why we created Rviita Energy Tea.
Well, you've definitely, been hitting the market and such. So, with that being said, I know that, recently you just released, I guess it was in the summer, it was your mango flavor, correct?
Yeah, we released our mango flavor, and this one was special to us because before mango, we'd actually formulated all of our products using the help of a food scientist. And we were using a third-party manufacturer, but just in the last couple of years, we built our own manufacturing line. And this mango flavor was the first one that we developed in-house. It was our first limited edition SKUs. We just brought it on for the summer, and it was a massive hit. It's been our definitely our all-time best-selling flavor. It was really well received by our customers, and we just feel so blessed with all the support we got for it throughout the summer.
Now, was, choosing the mango flavor because it was something that you did in-house? Was it something that you did market research on, or was it just a personal favorite of you and the team?
Yeah, great question. A little bit of both. Ever since the beginning, we've always enjoyed mango flavored beverages and treats and whatnot. So we thought we got to do a mango one day. But when we would do polls with our customers, whether it be on Instagram or LinkedIn or just our subscribers from our website, we say, hey, what flavor do you want to see? And the number one response was always mango. It was certainly the most requested. So the combination of always wanting to do it and then having it being the most requested flavor, it was just a no-brainer to get in the lab and formulate a mango flavor.
Well, that's amazing, and I'm gonna take this back and talk a little bit more about you because inspired by your 4-year anniversary, and you just put up a post talking about perseverance. In order to talk about perseverance and that, I think we should know just a little bit about you. So would you be able to just talk about your switch from engineering to Reviita and just maybe some key things that have happened since, Reviita started in the 4 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a bit of a unique individual in the food and beverage space in that I don't have any food or beverage experience before starting this company. So I'm actually a petroleum engineer, an oil and gas engineer by trade, if you can believe it. So I don't think there's much more of a 180 you can take in your career. Worked in oil and
No.
gas on the sustainability side for almost 6 years before starting Rviita Energy Tea. And what really motivated me to start the company is actually when I was in my early 20s, my best friend at the time, who was also working in oil and gas, he was an energy drink addict. I mean, this guy was drinking like 3, 4, or 5, sometimes 6 a day. I was out with him one evening and he'd had a few too many energy drinks. And I'll never forget, he gets this pale, horrified look on his face, nearly passes out. I rush him to the hospital and I'm waiting in this little room. And the doctor walks in and says, you're going to have a hard time believing this, but your friend, 21 years old, we think he's had a heart attack from the energy drinks. Now,
Mhm.
fortunately, he's made a full recovery. It's a happy ending to the story. But this was that light bulb moment for me. Myself, also in my early 20s. What the heck is in these energy drinks, right? Why isn't there a healthy alternative? Well, ironically, a few years later, now I'm into my oil and gas engineering career, and I'm just crushing these things, right? 2 energy drinks before lunchtime. And sure enough, I start having adverse health effects. I'm getting heartburn for the
Mhm.
first time in my life, indigestion, I'm not sleeping. And that was when, I sat down and said, okay, this is a problem that needs to be solved. Looked everywhere in the market for a healthy alternative. Couldn't find one. So started trying to formulate it in my kitchen. Figured out pretty quickly I had no idea what I was doing. So hired a food scientist out of Western Canada here. And over the course of 2 years, we formulated the product that we have here today. So it's certainly been a very challenging endeavor coming into this space with no experience. I've learned everything the hard way. I think all the hard lessons you could learn, I've learned them the hard way. Learned by trial and error, learned by making mistakes. Every mistake you can possibly imagine starting a food or beverage company, I think I've made the majority of them. So it's, as to my LinkedIn post from yesterday, this is an industry, consumer packaged goods that you have to be very tough mentally because it's a very difficult industry. It's a very rewarding industry too, but you're inevitably going to make mistakes. You're inevitably going to go through hard times, and you have to be very mentally strong and be willing to persevere.
For sure. 4 years is a testament to sticking with something in CPG because a lot of companies don't even last 2 years. Like, it really is a lot of perseverance.
Yeah, the failure rate is extremely high, especially in CPG. And there's certainly been lots of periods where, we questioned whether or not we were going to make it, but we've just refused to quit and keep coming back. And things I think are hopefully going to turn a corner for us soon.
Yeah, I'm really excited for the next steps in that because it seems like you have really good momentum going and you have good people working for you. Well, I shouldn't say for you and with you.
And with me, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really
Yeah.
blessed to have an incredible team. I was able to start the company with my sister and business partner, Carly. She's a former cardiac nurse, so also doesn't have any CPG experience, but is amazing with people. And then my business partner, Rob, he was a geophysicist, which I don't even really know what that is, but it has nothing to do with food and beverage. So the three of us, came into the industry with no prior experience, but I think in a lot of ways it's also been an advantage because we've questioned a lot of the norms in the industry. We've been able to do some things a little bit quicker and in a more unique manner than someone with experience might have done. So it's been our greatest advantage and disadvantage at the same time.
Well, I'm definitely gonna dive more into that, but I just have to make, like, a little side tangent about how the necessity of this is for now. I'm not sure if you I mean, of course, you'd probably be aware is, like, the recent focus on caffeinated drinks in the news
Yes.
spotted by, like, Logan I think it was Logan Paul, and then after that brought the CFIA looking to all these caffeinated beverages, and I'm just seeing on my emails all these recalls of just energy drinks that are just not
Yes.
following the standards.
Totally, and that was one of the big challenges with us getting started is when I first came up with the business plan, I thought we'd be able to launch in like 6 months, right? And
Mhm,
it took us a year and a half just about to get approved by Health Canada. And that's with using natural ingredients, right? They made us prove that our tea was, where it was sourced from and ensuring that it was up to their safety standards. So I couldn't believe the hoops we had to jump through. So in a way, I was relieved that some of these companies that are coming from other countries and aren't following the Health Canada standards, are being disciplined because it puts local companies like us who waited a
mhm.
year and a half to get our approvals at a bit of a disadvantage when they come here and don't follow the same rules.
It's so strange how, on one hand, it's great that you know that there's all these regulations, but then on the other hand, it's really confusing because you have, like you said, local companies like you who have the best interests in mind. And then you're looking at all these other ones on the shelf going, how did you get here when I took so long to do this?
Yeah, exactly. It can be very challenging for new entrepreneurs, right? Because it's great for a consumer in Canada because you can be quite assured that pretty well any product in a grocery store has, if they're following the rules, going to be manufactured to really some of the highest food safety standards in the world. But as a new entrepreneur with good intentions, what might take you 3 to 6 months to launch in another country could take 2 years here in Canada just because of all that extra red tape that you got to go through.
For sure. So bringing the conversation back to you, and you mentioned about going through persevering through a lot of things, and one of the things as an entrepreneur that I've thought about that might actually be the most difficult is the fact that there's so many things you can focus on. You could focus your attention on going to trade shows or going to grocery stores, talking to individuals, or focusing on your online marketing efforts. So getting into retail space can be really difficult. So how have you navigated this space and choosing what to focus on when you don't really have like a a laid out path in front of you that says, "Yes, I'm gonna get all my products out there."
Yeah, that's a really brilliant question, Veronica. And I think this is a mistake that I've made. I've seen a lot of new CPG entrepreneurs make is when you're starting your food or beverage company, you have one priority at the beginning of the company, really for the lifetime of the company, but especially in the early years, and that is sales, right? Sales solves everything. All of your financial problems, a lot of your hiring problems, all of that can be solved with more sales. Now,
Mhm.
the flip side of that is sales is often very hard, right? And for a lot of entrepreneurs, myself especially, I'm an introvert, I'm an engineer, right? People skills isn't necessarily my greatest skill in the world. It's hard to walk into a cold approach a store or cold approach a buyer and go and sell your product. But that is the most important thing you should be doing in the early years. And every time we've had a lull in our business, every time we go through a bit of a rough patch, when I do an honest audit of how I'm spending my time, I've gotten away from focusing on sales. So in the early days of the business, I had a great mentor who told me this, who enlightened me with this fact. He said, "Mitch, stop worrying about, having the perfect letterhead on your and the perfect email signature and having your website perfect. Why don't you just get out in stores and start selling? Right. And I was like, wow,
Mhm.
that's really good advice because I can invest in all of that stuff after. That stuff's not going to move the needle. What is going to move the needle is getting my product in the hands of customers. So in the early days, especially, that's how I've spent the majority of my time. In the last couple of years, I've had to take a little bit of a shift. Now, if you don't have a product to sell, sales isn't going to be doing you any good. So when we built our own manufacturing line, I've shifted a lot of my focus on perfecting the product, perfecting our manufacturing, because sales doesn't do you any good if you don't have a product to sell.
Of
So I think
course.
those two things should be the primary focus for an entrepreneur in the early years is selling your product, but also ensuring that you have product to sell and the quality of that product is superb.
So when it comes to actually going to these grocery stores, is it just, hey, like you call up the store manager? Do you just enter the store and say, "Can I speak to the manager?" Like how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And again, when I started, I had no idea how this worked. So I think I maybe broke some industry rules.
Okay.
What have you. So the first store we got into, I walked into a local grocery store. It doesn't even exist anymore here in Calgary. Walked in with a case of samples. I walked up to like the girl at the till, which normally you don't do, is you go to like customer service and I asked her, I said, "Hey, is there a manager around that I could speak with?" And she gave me this funny look and she's like, "I guess you could." And she paged the manager. I handed over the samples. I introduced myself. That was how we got our first grocery store, was just, as cold of an approach as you can imagine. Our first grocery chain was Calgary Co-op. I literally called the reception desk of the Calgary Co-op head office and just asked for who deals with beverages. And somehow managed to get a call with the beverage buyer. And that's how we ended up on the shelves of Calgary Co-op. So it was a lot of grassroots, just hustle, doing things that was very uncomfortable to me, which was, effectively knocking on doors, right? Just going
Hmm.
store to store with a business card and a case of samples, introducing myself, explaining what the product was. I got the door slammed in my face a lot of times, got told to leave a lot of
Oh
times,
my
but
gosh.
also got some of those initial wins, right? We got some of those early stores. And then once you have a little bit of traction,
Hmm.
it's a lot easier to get the next store, right? Once you can say, "Hey, we're doing well in Calgary Co-op," then Sobeys came on, and then it was just like the domino effect.
Wow, that's did you find yourself doing little pep talks with yourself before you walked into the store?
Oh, totally. I would practice my pitch in the mirror. And sometimes I'd sit in my car for like 10 minutes outside of a grocery store and then have to do deep breathing and be like, "Hey, you're gonna be okay, Mitch. You can do this. You can talk to somebody." And it is one of those skills that it's very awkward in the beginning, and especially I can remember the first grocery store I went into. This was like because I quit my job in January of 2020. So you can imagine that for timing. So I'm
Hmm.
starting my business in the midst of COVID here, and it was sort of in the early days when like you didn't know if you should wear a mask or if you should go into a
Oh
grocery
yeah.
store or not. And I had lots of grocery managers like effectively tell me to screw off more or less. And,
Oh
I
my
remember going home
gosh.
one day and it was like 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. and I just went straight to bed. Like I just couldn't handle this anxiety and the rejection. But it's kind of like working out in the gym, right? You start with that 20-pound dumbbell, it's really heavy, it hurts. And then you do that enough times and you can advance to the 25 and the 30 pound. It's the same thing with grocery store managers, not that I'm impermeable now, but I go into a grocery store and if a grocery manager's, doesn't want to see me that day or he's a little bit rude, instead of taking it personally, go, "Okay, it just wasn't a good time. I'll come back and see you another time. Hope you have a great day. Here's some samples." I just let it roll off my back. So it's a skill set that you develop, and the only way you can do it is just by learning the hard way, right?
I like that you point out that it's a skill set, that it's not something that you're born with, that you're like this way or that way, because coming from a science background as well, like coming into chemistry, you're very used to, you do the most you would probably communicate with a class is giving a presentation that that half the people aren't even paying attention to, and like the skin in your bone,
Yes.
like there's not really that much to it, but actually coming up and talking to someone and asking for something, it's not something that's taught. Because I did do a marketing minor and I realized how much just being in the different classrooms, how people presented themselves. Like you're in the sciences, a lot of people got their like slacks on and they're just, attending class, very smart people. But then you'd go into the marketing and people are ready to just like hustle and talk to people. And you could tell that there's just this different dynamic that school goes through. So
Yes, it's so true. I think it's, even people that are natural talkers, natural extroverts, I find still have to learn that skill set because these grocery managers are busy too, right? They don't want you to just talk at them for 10 minutes. So even if you're really good at talking, you're really good with people, you still have to learn that skill of like, okay, what's their mood today? Do they feel like a longer conversation? Do they just want it short and sweet today? And I think you can only really learn that through experience.
that's true. And I guess this speaks to maybe even like if a student wants to practice at these types of things, although networking events, it just gets you practice actually talking to people because I know from the podcast, it's taken me so long to just reach out to people because I was so scared to ask. Like I want to like talk to these really interesting people, but you're asking for someone's time and I'm just like, well, is it really worth it for me to ask them? But I've gone to the point where I'm a lot better because I'm like, I want to share these awesome stories with people. So if like you believe in what you're doing, it does get a little easier, but again, it's practice.
It's totally practice, yeah, and if you don't have a business, there's, other ways to practice. I remember when we were just starting, I didn't have a product yet, the someone at the grocery store, right? The clerk checking out your groceries, ask her how her day is. "How are you doing today? How's things? How do you like working here?" Like, I think just those types of interactions, the more you do that, the better you get at reading people's energy, and the better it's gonna make you at sales.
That's a really good idea. That reminds me of a video I watched recently where someone was also saying that studies have shown that if you have more of these little interactions, even just like you said with the grocery store, it can actually make your life better because you're getting more involved with like the community and just adding a little bit of positiveness to your day just by caring about others. So
100%. Yeah, you wouldn't believe some of my most genuine, uplifting, empowering interactions have been with, like someone that works at a grocery store, right? The person stocking the shelves, you walk up to them and you say, "Hey, how's your day going?" Right? And like mean that genuinely. It's very rare for a lot of people to have an interaction like that. So you can not only make somebody's day, but you can learn how to better connect with people, which is going to help your business. It's going to help your happiness. It's all connected.
for sure. That's always been something that I've really been inspired by my parents that they've been able to do where, we've just been at a concert, for example, and then my dad just turns to the person next to and it's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I was like, "Whoa, that is not something that I'm used to doing."
Right? Yeah, me neither. I really admire people that have a huge battery for doing things like that because it's something really impressive.
Well, translating that over to the social media side, so to say, you've been really open with your journey throughout this in terms of Revita. Can you speak to maybe why you have been so open? Like, aren't you scared about having repercussions about being open with these types of things?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Veronica. And I try to be very transparent, especially in my LinkedIn, right? When we're going through a
Mhm.
hard time, I'm not putting a mask on and pretending everything's wonderful. And a big part of the reason that I do that is I've been very inspired by Andy Frisella. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He has a very famous podcast in the US called Real AF. Before that, it was called the MFCEO podcast. And he's now a billionaire, but he is so open. He's the first entrepreneur I've ever hear openly talk about how hard it was, especially in the early days. Because I think the trap that I've fallen into is, especially in the first year of my business, like the first couple of years when we were formulating, is I'd go on Instagram and I would see some 17-year-old with a Lamborghini running ads to like this course, right? And you're going to be a
Mhm.
millionaire in 2 weeks. And you look at yourself in the mirror and I would go, well, what's wrong with me? I'm working so hard. I'm giving everything that I have to this business and I'm not driving a Lamborghini yet, right? And I would get so frustrated to the point where I genuinely thought about quitting multiple times in the formulation phase of the business. And then I had stumbled upon this podcast with Andy Frisella, and he really talked about how hard it was in the early days. And he's so successful now, like genuinely successful, not fake
Mhm.
successful like you see on Instagram. And I was really inspired by that. And when I got more immersed in consumer packaged goods content, one of the things that really frustrates me in the industry is you go on LinkedIn or you go on Instagram and it's nothing but the highlight reel, right? It's a
Mhm.
bunch of founders, and I've met some of them, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but a lot of times it's a blatant lie, right? They make it look like they're
Mm.
killing it. They make it look like it's easy. Everyone likes their product. There's no issues. Everything's great. It's the highlight reel. And that doesn't help the next generation of entrepreneurs because they're going to feel like I did, right? They're going to look in the mirror and they're going to say, well, what's wrong with me? Why is it so much harder for me? And so I guess, that's my way of giving back is by being very transparent that this journey has been brutally hard. It has pushed me to the limits of what I thought I could persevere through many times. It's been very difficult. It has not been an easy journey, and we're heading in the right direction. I think we're going to get there. We're
Mhm.
going to be a big successful company one day, but we're going to be a big successful company because we persevered through these hard things, not just because the red carpet's been rolled out for us and it's been easy, because that's not reality, right? That's not the reality of entrepreneurship for anybody. Or if it is, it's a very rare exception. This journey is hard. Developing something great that's long lasting, that helps people, is very difficult. And we need to get that message out there so that, that CPG failure rate, like you mentioned at the beginning, it's extremely high. And I believe it's extremely high because, you get a year into your business and you come into that first really hard time and you go on Instagram and you think, oh, well, it's easy for everybody else. This just isn't for me. This isn't a good enough idea. I'm going to shut it down, move on to the next thing. Whereas if they had persevered, that's where the magic really happens. So it's been something I'm very passionate about and hope to continue to do to, really help that next generation of entrepreneurs coming up realize that it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and you have to be mentally tough if you're going to succeed in this industry.
I really like that, and you are right, being open with these, failures and such, it is easy to see the highlight reel, and I do think there is a little bit of a shift happening as I see, other individuals like Erica Rankin from Brodo, where she's really shared her story about what she's done, and
Yes.
yes, she's local to us, so I've met her in person, great person.
Yep. She's
Um
flying to Calgary this weekend to stay with us, actually. So she's a
Oh,
good friend of
wow!
ours. Yeah, so I mean, she's another one that's really inspired us. She's very transparent, right, about how hard it's been for her. And look at that's what people actually resonate with. That's the ironic part, is nobody really wants the highlight reel, right? They want that real authentic story because that's what you can relate
It's true. Maybe I need to push myself a little because I admit I
to.
have not put any thing out there except in the podcast form. Like I find it very easy when I'm having these conversations because I'm talking to someone one on one. But when you're actually crafting that message and putting it on LinkedIn in the written word, I find that's like much more intimidating than a conversation between the two of us and talking about my failures.
Totally. And there's also a fine balance there where you don't want to come across as a victim either, right? So
That's true.
you got to toe that line between, the highlight reel and also being a victim, and somewhere in the middle and just being transparent. This is what we learned. This is how we're going to get better from it. And you're right. It's a very difficult balance, but Erica, I think, is one of the all-time greats at doing that. She's a really tremendous person.
Yeah, to be able to talk about that shift of going from admitting that their initial product wasn't really going too well and like doing a whole 180 turn into like doing something new, like that takes some courage, honestly, to just flat out say this didn't work, I'm doing this and showing that transition. It's really amazing.
It's really, really inspiring, and that's true successful entrepreneurship, right? Is you inevitably are gonna have to pivot, right? All the great entrepreneurs have done it. Even Amazon, Jeff Bezos, right? He started selling books, now he sells everything. So that was a big pivot in his business. It's just unfortunate that so many just only wanna talk about the highlights, but as you said, I think that that tide is starting to shift a little bit here, and we're seeing more and more entrepreneurs just tell the way it really is.
As someone who is a business owner and hopefully, again, expanding as you have your protection facility in BC, as someone who would maybe hire more individuals who are more in, let's say, the operations side, and that would you look at someone having a social media background as being something that was not good to come into it? Like, I'm just trying to think of other people doing that that might not be entrepreneurs.
Like in terms of hiring somebody with a social media presence, is that
Yeah,
what
so
you
let's
mean?
just say you're, like, looking for a plant manager. I don't know, throwing that out there, and,
Yeah.
they talk about their failures and such that would that be something that would deter you, or would it actually be something encouraging, do you think?
Oh, I think it'd be something very encouraging, right? Like that's some of the questions we'll even ask in interviews, right? Is what are some of the challenges that you've overcome in your life? Because, there's tons of things that go wrong in a production line. And I need somebody that's, willing to stay with me late at the plant one day and try and fix the machine if it's down, right? Not just throw in the towel because it's go home time. So I think absolutely, having a social media presence is always a plus when we're trying to hire someone. And if they're very transparent about overcoming big challenges, or even if, we've looked at hiring ultra marathon runners and people that have done these extraordinary things, right, that require a lot of grit, like those are great candidates for CPG because we know in this industry, you need people that are resilient, that want to work hard, that are innovative, that have been through, challenging things and are able to persevere because CPG is a tough industry. You're up against, you know, behemoth companies, right? We're going up against the
Mhm.
biggest beverage companies in the world, and we need people that are scrappy and willing to sacrifice and willing to work really hard. So absolutely, I think that's a huge benefit.
Well, thank you for sharing that because I think that is something that maybe people think about. Social media has become an extension of how others see ourselves. Obviously, it's very important to your story as an entrepreneur, but sometimes it can be a little more difficult for, individuals who aren't seeking out to start a CPG business or something or want to be more of those support roles. Like I think of someone like me, I don't see myself starting a business, but I always think, how would it reflect if I shared my journey on social media? I always debate about that. So it's good to hear that there are perspectives that say that this would be good. I know it probably isn't the case for everyone, but it's good to know that there are some businesses that think this is a good thing.
Totally. I think for the right company that you're gonna fit in well with their culture, they're gonna love that, right? There's probably some cultures that are more pompous, maybe for lack of a better word, you know what I mean? Like a little
Mhm.
bit more like you don't talk about stuff like that. I don't know of any cultures like that. I'm sure they exist out there, but all of the CPG companies that I know would absolutely love to have a person like that, right? That's transparent, honest, has been through tough things, have shown they're resilient. That's the ideal employee, I think, for any company in any industry.
Well, this kind of ties in a little bit to with one of the questions that I wanted to ask in terms of just business culture and such. So one of the things that stood out to me with one of the podcasts that you had spoken on, I can't remember which one, was that as you've grown your business, you've started to become now you have people that work for you. It's not just a you're you and your family members going at this. So there's people that depend on you. How has it been that transition becoming someone who has to have a successful business that supports other people? Like, how have you been able to deal with those feelings?
Yeah, that's another really great question, Veronica. And I think it's an interesting metamorphosis that probably most entrepreneurs go through, right? In your first couple of years of business, where it's just you and maybe your business partners working out of your house, there's not as much pressure, right? If you have a slower month with sales, you're going to be okay. You'll push through the next month. But once you start bringing on employees that are now counting on your business to put food on the table every month, especially employees with children, I mean, that's a
Mhm.
whole new level of responsibility, right? And I think it's forced me to really grow up. I think that was really I felt like I went from a boy to a man when we started hiring staff, right? It's forced me to mature. It's forced me to take things even more seriously than I did before, right? We can't afford to have a bad month now. That's not an option that's on the table, right? I have to make sure that my employees are able to put food on the table for their families. So I think, a really important time for any entrepreneur, and you have to take it very seriously. And you have to have a conversation with yourself and say, okay, this is the real thing now, right? There's other people counting on my business. It's not just about me anymore. This isn't a selfish endeavor. This is a selfless endeavor. And I need to do whatever it takes to ensure that the company grows. We're hitting our targets for our investors, and we are continuing to grow careers for our employees because you're only ever going to be as good as the people that you employ. So yeah, it's been a very interesting experience. I'd say I've grown a lot, bringing on employees and helping to develop them and seeing them grow. It's extremely rewarding. Probably the best part of business, I would say, is seeing an employee come in here and grow and develop. And it's also the hardest part when you bring in an employee and it doesn't work out, or they leave, or you have to let them go. That's the hardest and worst part of the business. But it's something you got to take very seriously, and it's something you should certainly consider if you're going to start a any business. Really, is how is this going to benefit other people's lives, and how am I going to ensure once I hire employees that we create a great career for them?
So let's speak a little bit more to that in terms of growing. You've been using the word helping grow their careers and such. So in Rviita, like what does that look like? Like what type of things could they be doing that are growing their career within?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and I'm still figuring this out, right? I'm
Mhm.
still very new to hiring new staff, but when I was an employee, right, I wanted to have some direction as to where I could be in my career, right? And so we could always do a better job at this, but I'm really trying to think of the new people that we bring in. Okay, 5 years from now, when we're in a much better situation financially, could this person be a manager? Could they be an executive at our company? How could we grow their career so that they're making more money, have more responsibility, but they also grow as a person? So we've done things like every new staff, we have a reading program, right, where we give them a list, some books that have really helped me, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's typically the first
Mhm.
book for the employee. So really investing in their development, not just as someone that works in your company, but as a person, right? I think if you can, help them in any way in their personal lives, that's really important. But thinking down the road, if I bring someone to pack boxes in the back, I don't just want them packing boxes 3 years from now, right? I
Mhm.
want them to maybe be managing our warehouse or managing something on the production line. How are we going to grow them into that role? Or how are we going to develop them so that they can have a great career somewhere else? Because sometimes that's the answer too, right? Is give them the skill set so that they can spend, some of our summer students, they spend a few years here working on our production line, then they get out of school and they get a great career. So they thinking 3, 4, 5 years down the road with an employee and where you could see them being, having that vision, sitting down and talking with them. What do you want to be doing, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road in your career? And let's figure out how, even though we're a small company right now, and some of the tasks that you're doing may seem a little bit menial, how can we develop this and develop your skill set so that you can be, at X point 3 years from now? That's been one of the strategies that we've employed, and then we can do a better job at it. But it's constant work in progress.
Wow. Oh, that is so cool. I love that. I know that, you know, as you've seen with food, you can have so many different backgrounds coming in and you never know where that skill set is really going to help you out or that knowledge that you learn there. So having it's so great to hear about people who are helping others and trying to build up their careers because maybe at this point they might not have that big education background, but that doesn't mean they're not ready to work hard and there might be something that's more well suited for them that's higher in that career growth.
Absolutely, right? We brought in like our first employee, Dalen. We brought him in to pack boxes in the back, and he developed his graphic design skills himself, right? And now he's a full-time graphic designer for us. We love him to death. He's done so many good things for our company, and he's getting ready to transition to a new chapter in his life. And so that's been we're so proud of him and we love him. And it's just been so cool to see him grow and develop. And we want to create that same, opportunity for other people. But also, there's drawbacks to being a small company too, as compared to going to a more bigger and established company. So one of the challenges as a small CPG business is you have to figure out how to create career paths for people where they see a growth opportunity with you.
So I guess if someone was looking to grow, so I guess it's really just about having those conversations and just being open with that in terms of you might not know where you want to go, but if you have that open dialogue, you can start to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the mistakes that, I've made too, is you want to make sure that you're sitting down with your employees, if not quarterly, at least, a couple times a year and being like, okay, how are things going? Where do you want to go in your career? Right. And how do we get you there? I think that's a really important conversation as a new entrepreneur or manager that you need to be having with your team. And I've, in full transparency, I've neglected to do that sometimes. And it's that's something that's really important. And going forward, I'm going to prioritize, because you want to make sure that your employees are happy and they feel valued and they feel like part of the team and part of what you're growing, and that you're giving them the opportunities that they need to see a future with your company.
Mhm. Going back to, I have to point out because you mentioned about reading and books, and you talked about how to win friends and influence people. I think that's the full title of the book. It's a really good book. It's
Yes.
one of the first books I read in kind of my personal growth journey, I guess you could say. So, let's talk just a little bit more about that. What have been some of your favorite books on this journey?
Yeah, breeding has been, an integral part of what we've done here at Rviita. It's, I think, a big part of the reason why I had the courage to quit my previous secure career and start this this entrepreneurial dream. Reading is so powerful. I equate it to a professional basketball player's got to be in the gym getting his shots up. A professional
Mhm,
entrepreneur needs to be reading books and developing, right? That's your personal training. That's how you get better. So some of the, my all-time favorite books is The Millionaire Fastlane by MJ DeMarco. It's
mhm.
like an all-encompassing entrepreneurship book. Have you read it, Veronica, or heard of it?
It's on my to read. I've heard of it. I know like
Yeah.
the cliff notes of it, but I haven't read it yet.
Truly, that's the most life-changing book I would say I've ever read, like, in terms of just changing the way that I viewed the world, the way that I viewed entrepreneurship. It's just such a beautifully written book by someone that's really built a great business. And then The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster by Darren Hardy is another one I go back to time and time again. It's basically an all-encompassing encyclopedia of entrepreneurship. It covers everything from leadership to time management to growth. Everything's in that book. That's a really, really good one. And then some of the more personal development ones, I think The Slight Edge is an all-time classic. That's a really important book. I think everybody should read that book. It's extremely powerful, not just for business, but for your personal life. Quantum Success is another one. Talks a little bit about the law of attraction and how to organize your thoughts so that you're in the best position to become successful, but also handle the hard times. That's been a good one. Relentless by Tim Grover is probably my favorite mental toughness book of all time. So those five, I would say, are the ones that I go back to time and time again.
Out of curiosity, is there any fiction books? Because a lot of people, like to talk about the nonfiction, but there's books like The Alchemist, for example, that can really be a meaningful impact, or even I have some personal ones that are maybe very niche, but is there any fiction ones that you might go back to?
Yeah, that's a great, great question. I haven't read The Alchemist, heard great things about it. There's not a fiction book per se that I'd say has had a significant impact on me, but there's a couple of movies,
Hmm.
the Wonky movie and Shawshank Redemption. There's
Oh
so
yeah.
many it's not a book, but a storyline that's has so many parallels with entrepreneurship. Rocky in terms of just, the beating that he took in the boxing ring is and his refusal to quit. I mean, that's the type of spirit you need to be in entrepreneurship. And Shawshank Redemption, spending all that time in prison and just chipping away at building this hole and then having to crawl through the 2-mile long sewage pipe. I mean, there's a lot of that's how entrepreneurship feels. A lot of things, right? You're just slowly chipping away at something. You got to go through some really hard things, but at the end of it all, it's just this incredible, fulfilling experience. So those are two stories that I really resonate with. But that's a good point. I think I should maybe read some more fiction books to draw some inspiration from that.
Yeah, I mean, nonfiction's great. There's a lot of good stories in it. But I've just been really recently, maybe it's because I'm into technical journals for like my PhD. So I know it's good to read those nonfiction books, but I'm sometimes a little tapped out from nonfiction that I love to go into storytelling. And I think of some of my favorite things that just remind me persevere, and that can be in these fiction. And I think you do point out that movies can be an important inspiration as well. If you sit down, give a movie a full attention, it can be just as impactful just thinking about someone's perseverance journey. And yeah.
100%. Yeah, same with, sports or athletics, like seeing,
Mhm.
studying some of these great minds, these great athletes because their mentality and how they persevere, the Michael Jordans, the Muhammad Ali, the Kobe Bryants, these I've, read biographies and studied their mindset. And I've learned a lot about business from the way that they approach challenges, but also their work ethic, right? At the end of the day, work ethic is such an important ingredient in this entrepreneurial journey. And you want to make sure that you have a top-notch work ethic if you're going to be successful, running a business.
And throughout this journey, we've been saying successful. Has it always been your focus as you go through these 4 years to just be, I want Revita to succeed, or has there been more of a more nuanced approach? Like, how do I want to word this? I guess where I'm going with it can be a very challenging journey because sometimes you lose direction. You don't really know what you're going for. Like I think about me with my PhD. Sometimes it's like, is it really worth it to write this random dissertation on water and oil emulsions stabilized by fat crystals? Like, is this really my focus and goal in life? So I always go back to for me personally, I believe in science. I believe in how it really moves things forward, how it puts a way to thinking. So, do you find just getting Revita to succeed has been your idea, or has there been something more nuanced?
Yeah, that's again a really brilliant and deep question, Veronica. And I would say your definition of success will change, likely change a lot throughout your entrepreneurial journey, right? So when I had first started the company, it was a pretty superficial definition of success. It was Lamborghinis and Rolexes and a big bank account. I wanted to, I was like
Mhm,
any for a lot of guys in their mid-20s, right? I wanted that life and I wanted to be in control of my own income. I wanted to be quote unquote my own boss, which I hate that term now. And then you get a couple years into the business and like we talked about before, you hire your first employee, right? And you go through some challenging times in the business. 4 years, I've never taken a paycheck, right? So I've been stripped of an income for 4 years. I've been stripped of financial security, and your definition of success starts to change when that happens, right? Is money still a part of the equation? It always will be. But for me, success is so much more than that. It's having employees that their lives are changed coming to work here every day. It's customers that have truly benefited from your product, right? It's creating a brand that stands for something positive in this world that can oftentimes be very dark. So success for me now, it's no longer superficial. It's not about the money. It's a legacy play, right? What are they going to say about Rviita 40 years from now? That's the goal now. Is how do we create something exceptional that transcends just dollars and cents, right? It's so much more than that. It's about having a positive impact on the world. And I think the entrepreneurs that I've spoken with that are 10, 15 years ahead of me that have built these incredible businesses. My father is one of them. He has almost 200 employees now in his business. And I don't even see him so much thinking of it's not about the money anymore. It's about that's 200 families that are putting food on the table every month, right? My clients are being better served by my company. We're helping all of these people and we're a force of good, right? That's what I hear him talking about. I don't hear him talking about the numbers, right? And so I think
mhm.
that's been really eye-opening for me is, that's part of your progression as an entrepreneur is, your definition of success, I think will certainly change over the course of this experience.
Well, I can definitely tell that it has been because I've been following with the more recent, and I would never have any idea that like your initial goal was the Lamborghinis and such. Like when I read through your posts and I hear your journey through the podcast, I hear that gratitude to those that who are helping you on this journey, like the growth that you've had, the fun that you've had, and just all these different things. So I guess it does go to show that things can shift to what I was asking earlier, and your definition of success is okay to change, and you don't necessarily like what might work for you right now and get you through those hard days. Yeah, it might have suited you at that one time, but it's okay for it to change and to have more I have to agree with you. It's much better to have outward goals like that than maybe monetary.
Absolutely. I think it's just part of that maturation process. And it's okay to have financial goals. Like I still
Yeah.
want those things one day, but the ironic part of it all is you get those things by helping people, right? By having pure intentions. That's how you end up getting to that goal in the end, anyways. So that's been one of my, I guess, biggest paradigm shifts over the course of the last 4 years is really realizing that, you know, money is kind of like what blood is to the body, right? That's not the purpose of being a human being is to produce blood. It's but you need it. You need it to survive. You need it to grow. But your purpose is so much bigger than just that, right? And I think the founder of Nike actually gave that analogy in his book, another great book about entrepreneurship, and he's very open about his challenges. So it's so much more than just money, and I think that's a good sign that you're headed in the right direction. Is when you start to shift your idea of success away from monetary goals towards how many people can I help and how much positive impact can I have.
Well, I think I'm gonna leave it there because I think that's a great place to end. But before I let you go, Mitch, I want to just ask you two more questions. So, for our audience of young people, if you could give any piece of advice, what would you give?
I would say if you have something that you've always wanted to do, right? Maybe it's start a business, maybe it's run a marathon, whatever that is, start today and like genuinely start today. Because the one regret I have in business is that I just didn't start sooner. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had this idea since I was in my early 20s, since my friend had that heart attack. I just didn't start because, quite to put it bluntly, I was afraid. Right. And even when I got started, it was so overwhelming, but I just made the goal of do one thing a day. And that one thing a day oftentimes was just Googling, how do I start a beverage company? And I was read an article, and that one thing a day has led me to where we are today. 1,200 stores, have a beautiful manufacturing line. We're, creating jobs here in Calgary. So if there's something you really want to accomplish, it doesn't have to be a business, but it could be, maybe you've always wanted to learn, I don't know, martial arts or something. Like enroll yourself in a class today and just go and do it. Because that's, the one regret I have is I just wish I would have started this sooner.
That's really good advice. And the last question that I have to ask before I let you go is where can people find you in Rviita Tea?
Yeah, you can find us all across Canada and in a number of grocery stores. We're in the West here, we're in Sobeys, Safeway, Superstore. In the East, we're going to be popping up in more and more stores. We're in places like Goodness Me, Healthy Planet. You could always find us on our website, reviita.com, RVIITA.com. We're also on Amazon, and you can find us on social media at Revitalize, at RVIITALIZE, and myself on LinkedIn, Mitch Jacobson.
Perfect. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes to make it easy for everyone. So, thank you so much, Mitch, for coming on the show. I really love talking with you. You've also put into my head that I got to put a little bit more of that hard, difficult work in terms of growing up this podcast because I've really been inspired and you've been doing some great stuff. And thank you so much for sharing your journey. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It's truly an honor. You asked some amazing questions. Those are some of the best questions that have ever been asked. So you have a bright future ahead of you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Thank you, everyone, so much for listening to episode 79 of the Food Grads podcast. All the notes to this podcast can be found by clicking on the Students and Grads tab on the Food Grads website. There, you can find any notes to past or future episodes. Is there anyone you would like us to interview in the show? Perhaps yourself? Or maybe there's a certain career path you would like us to explore, then let us know. You can email me at veronica.hislop, HISLOP, at foodgrads.com, or reach out on any of our social media channels. Have you ever considered becoming a food entrepreneur? That's one way to break out into the food industry. Forge your own path and learn all the intricacies of the area. When researching for the episode, I spent a lot of time listening to other podcasts which Mitch has guested on, and I was able to learn so much about him. Just search Mitch's name on wherever you get your podcasts, and you will find a ton of interviews where he dives into so many different topics. I can't get over how many times Mitch has actually gone on a podcast. It's quite impressive. But anyways, one of the common threads that I found throughout all these podcasts was health, which makes sense where Reviita's roots came from. Putting myself out there, I'm not the person to be giving health advice. I tell everyone to relax, but I'm not really the person to tell. Managing a PhD and doing the stuff on food grads and trying to have a somewhat of a social life and keep a place organized, it's not easy. It's difficult, but I love doing it all, but rest is probably not something I do as much as I should have. It wasn't mentioned in this podcast, but Mitch puts health first. He wakes up at 4 a.m. in the morning just to work out, and I think that's really impressive, and something I'm striving to do a little bit more myself is exercise. I used to be really good, but it's hard. It's hard, especially when you manage a really long commute. So shout out to all those out there that are going hard for it. I know how you feel, but I think the point I'm trying to get at here is that Mitch is able to share a lot of his story, and he shows that you can put your health first. And it is important because if you're not on your best game, then you really can't support others that are in your life. So, this is just your public service announcement. Don't forget to take care of yourself. I think that Mitch shows, even though he does struggle with the journey sometimes, as seen in his podcast or as heard in his podcast, taking care of yourself is important, and don't forget that. Anyways, that's it for this week's episode. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I will see you next time.